Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are around the world. This is MP Strydom. I'm your co-host of the Mind War podcast, speaking to you from Pretoria. And with me, my co-host, Jean Roux.
Hello, MP, and I have not joined you for quite a few podcasts. And I must say, I'm really impressed with what you've pulled off the last few podcasts. Good job, man.
Yeah, we're blessed with speaking to very interesting people about very interesting things. And as a matter of fact, we're going to have a review episode, our next episode, where Jean and I are going to talk a little bit about some of our favorite guests and some of the favorite topics that we've had the privilege to discuss on the Mind War podcast as we approach our 50th podcast.
And this is the Mind War podcast. As a reminder, tongue-in-cheek, when you listen to this, you'll be able to warp your mind and warp your mind into the future at much faster speeds. Talking about that, we've got a guest that is busy warping an industry and a specific mining group, MP.
Yes, that's right. Ricus Grimbeek is the president and CEO at Trevali Mining Company. He's also a cycling enthusiast. And it's interesting, if you look at his LinkedIn profile, he claims that he's building the world's most sustainable mining company. Ricus, welcome to the Mind War podcast.
Thank you, MP, and thank you, John. Good to be with you guys.
Excellent.
Yes, absolutely. That's a very bold claim, and it comes from a fairly new but very bold company. Can you just tell us in 2 seconds a little bit about Trevali?
Yeah, Trevali is a silver lead zinc company. We've currently got 4 operations around the world. We have an operation in Peru, we've got an operation in Canada, an operation in Burkina Faso, and then one in Namibia. But I think the company is much more than that. We're a bunch of very committed people that truly want to create the world's most sustainable company. Mm-hmm. And we use, we tap into the skills and the knowledge of our people. We've created an amazing team. We run a company on a very different structure and not the normal typical structure that you would have. It's a very flat organization. We focus heavily on inclusion. So I got this, a lot of people talk about inclusion and diversity and kind of collapse the two concepts into one. They're two very distinct things. For me, inclusion is an action. You've got to work on inclusion every single moment of the day. Oh. And the outcome is diverse thoughts and diverse people that would be willing to join. And sometimes you have diverse people, but you don't allow them to speak up. So, but if you create an inclusive environment, that's what you can do. And the thing with diversity is it's not about ticking boxes or looking good. It's actually about creating performance. And what we find is that if we can tap into all people that we have working for us, and I'll talk a little bit about the community as well, is that the ideas and the ways that you do work just improves dramatically. So when I say the communities, I mean that as well. It's not a tick box thing where you say all these wonderful things about including communities. It really is a partnership with communities, because mining is not a sustainable industry by definition. We don't put things back; we take things out. So by design, it's going to come to an end at some stage. So it's important to think about what you're going to leave behind when you start, because that's going to impact the community in which you operate. And the flip side is that, we're also in the backyard of communities and countries, and we're leaving things behind that they need to be happy with. Mm. And I worked in some really interesting parts of the world in my career, and I've seen firsthand how mining impacts communities and how it impacts kids. Environment. And from a very young age in the industry, I realized that there must be a better way to do this. There must be a way that we can supply the metals to the world that the world needs, because I do smile when people tell me that mining is not essential, or that we don't need mining. That person normally need to look at their phone and say, this thing won't be here if it's not for mining. But I think there is, and I know there is, a better way of doing mining. And I'm also very, very pleased that our some of my colleagues in the industry are also moving towards this, and everyone's trying to get their head around how to do this. I think what we do, and maybe it ties nicely with the title of your podcast, is we're doing it at warp speed.
Right.
It's one of the reasons I joined Trevali is that, I've worked for bigger companies in the past as well. And I'm not the most patient person. I like to get stuff going and moving. And it's like my team would say to you that I think and work in hours and days, not months and years. And that's also part of an agile approach. I'm also not scared to make mistakes and to give something a go. And then if it doesn't turn out the way we thought, then we pivot and we find a way to take the next step. So we're creating this company, and some might say we think too much of ourselves. That's why we say we're creating the world's most sustainable company. But to me, that's just a goal, and hopefully it challenges other CEOs to also say, no, we want to be that one. Because I'd be super happy if others can give it a go as well, because I think the industry needs it, and I think the world needs it. The world needs sustainable mining, and it's possible through people, technology, and the platforms that we can use.
I'm going to come back to a point that you've made now, and maybe I'll ask you a little bit about the changing reputation of mining and whether you think mining has managed to change its reputation. But before we go down that route, you talk about people and you talk about communities and sustainability and all things kind and fluffy, and yet you're a mining engineer. So, those aren't things that people connect, engineering and these kinds of approaches. So tell us a little bit about Ricus Grimbeek. How did you become the person that you are? Where did you grow up? What's your background? And so on.
Yes, I was born in South Africa. And I think I'm super proud of that, because I think South Africa gives a child a different perspective on life. There's a creativity in South Africa that's kind of instilled in people that live there. And it's quite interesting, because when I go back to South Africa, people don't see it, but sometimes it's very, very difficult for a fish to know that it's in water until you've taken it out of water. And South Africa's got amazing creative melting pot of cultures and people and thoughts, and also there's a can-do attitude. So South Africans don't they don't go sit in a corner and cry and things don't work out and stamp their feet and wait for a dole payment. You've got to get up and you've got to make a plan and you've got to move forward. So I think
that make a plan thing. So for interrupting you, but that's of course a very South African thing to say. Mark a plan. You've just got to make a plan and get over it, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think so. You asked who I am. I'm definitely very much formed by that and informed by that. Also, I think my whole thinking around sustainability comes from South Africa, because we grew up closer to nature. I've always wanted to have a farm, and I ended up buying one in Australia. And the other one is the whole thing about inclusivity and diversity. I think, again, the experiences I've had. So I went to 11 schools. All over the country, and all the way from Cape Town up to Nelspruit and everything in between. And you do learn a lot about inclusivity and diversity and the power of inclusion when you're a child and you move from school to school. So that definitely shaped who I am. And then, I remember my dad told me when I was like I think today it's like grade 10, standard 8 or something like that. They said that he's not going to pay for me to go to university. So, I've got to find a way to get a bursary on. So, and again, some people would say, oh, that's terrible. Why don't you do that? I think it's the best thing, because it forces you to, again, make a plan. You've got to find a way. And so I quite interestingly found I got a bursary from our arms school. So to go and study mechanical engineering. Because I also love Formula One, I love cars, and so that's how I ended up with bicycles, because that's what I can afford. And I started studying mechanical engineering actually at Potts University.
Oh, I won't keep that against you now.
Yeah, well, the next part of the story, you can, because I did that for a year, and then I had to go and do my holiday work, and they told me for the next 4 years you're going to work on the undercarriage, or on what do you call the onderstel, the suspension of a rattle. So for those that know me will know that if you tell me that I'm going to do something for the next 4 years, exactly the same thing, work on the same thing, that's not going to work for me. So
the hours and minutes man.
Yeah, the hours and minutes man. And then I played rugby, and there was at SAU's under 20, and I played for the Potts team, and then I watched the the Takis team, and I thought, man, I'd love to play with those guys. They seem like they're really cool, and they know what they're doing. So this all came together, and I said, no, I need to move. I can't stay here. So I went and I looked at what other bursaries I could get, and then I got a mining engineering bursary from Genco, and but there's no mining engineering at Potch, so I had to move my second year to Pretoria University.
Right,
and that's when I went to Tux, and that's how I got into mining. It wasn't by any clear, passion to do something in mining. It was basically that's the bursary I could get, and they paid really well because they paid for your books and the classroom, and also for the res where I stayed. So that worked out fine. Yeah. So that's
and
how
for
I got
those
into
who would
mining.
like to know, which res were you in, Ricus?
I think it kind of explains a little bit as well what happened to me later in life. I was in college.
I was just going to say, it must have been college. That was right next to the rest that I was in Duivels.
Yeah. And I was in the Republic of College. And so for those of you that don't know, Republic of College is like they declared themselves separate from the Republic of South Africa. Always a little bit different. So.
Always a little bit different. That's fascinating. And then you got into mining. And which mining company did you get involved with first?
Yeah, so I had the bursary from Genco, and then I ended up doing my holiday work, because when you get a mining bursary that I didn't know at the time, you never get a holiday, because every holiday you've got to go and work at the mines.
Yeah.
That's great from getting some pocket money, but you also don't go on holidays. So I worked most of my holidays in the gold mines in Welkom and Carletonville.
Mm-hmm.
I became a Yamtar. I don't know if so. For those of you that don't know, a Yamtar, that's like a learner miner. There's nothing lower than a learner miner. So you started right at the bottom of the world, literally. 3,000 meters under the earth, you start life. Yeah, so I started in gold mining. So when I finished, I did my last year dissertation on coal mining. And I thought that looked nice because you can walk upright. And and I was very, very interested in mechanized mining, because at that stage, in the very early 90s, mechanized mining was only in its infancy in South Africa. So I started at Transnatal, and I again, by luck, ended up in a mine called Delmas Collieries. And Delmas Collieries was a super struggling power station supplying mine. And, we basically were hand to mouth every month. So every month we would, some months we'd make a little bit of profit and other months would be under. And so I learned everything there, from, how to really speak Fanagalo, how to really connect with people, how to work unsafely and safely. And I think that's also shaped a lot of what I've thought about safety later in life. And also how to do every single type of job on the mine, because, you don't have many departments. Everyone's got to chip in and make it work. And also saw the power of teamwork, and also the power of the shadow a leader casts. What interests the boss fascinates the people.
Yeah.
And how that can change and impact people's lives, communities, and a whole organization. So that taught me so much about that as well. And it was a fascinating 2 years. It also taught me that I wanted to know a lot more about mining and the technical side of it. Then so up until now, I fell into mining because of many other things other than mining. And then I started getting really interested in the technical side of mining, and also how to bring mechanized mining in. So I was dumb enough, to be the first, or to take on the first Woest Alpine 75. They gave it to me. I just got my blasting ticket, and all the mine manager came and he said, "We've got this new machine that we need to use to cut coal." And all the other older miners looked at me and they pushed me forward and said, "No, he'll take it. He's the guy for this." And I know why they did it, because we never made bonus, because we couldn't machine to work for the first 3-4 months. It was just a disaster, and it was always breaking down. I became like a mechanic and an electrician and a miner and everything to keep the machine going, because it was right at the beginning. It was the first machine that came in. And the funniest part was that they actually gave us no shuttle cars. They gave me a trailing conveyor. So to put behind this thing. So instead of a shuttle car and a loader, or the shuttle car behind and the continuous miner, they gave us one of these conveyor belts that was supposed to follow the thing behind and then dump it in a tip. And it the biggest disaster ever because that thing never worked. So I ended up, I had to go and steal people's shuttle cars so that we can get some production out. So we would be scrambling around the mine, looking for old equipment that we could rebuild and get ready to work. So as I say, sometimes you get lucky, and I was lucky enough to work there, and it gave me a 20-year experience in 2 years.
Wow. Because I think we're starting to understand you a little bit better now. We caught up with you many years later than this, and we often in MineRP say what you've done the first 5 to 10 years of your life is really sort of predicting how you'll be behaved later, but maybe it's just a colloquial comment. But we caught you up as COO of South 2. We work with you a little bit there at Vale and now at Trevali. And you are truly thinking differently than other executives. You are truly believing and are expediting and pushing your team towards the intersection of community processes, technology, tools, etc., and constantly challenging the status quo. I think you'd explain to us, maybe if you wanted to link that up, fast forwarding to now, what is your view of how you are busy reforming Trevali? And I see that you are improving the business, you are getting investors to invest in Rospina. You guys made an announcement on the 17th of August. So why are you so different?
I'm not sure why I'm different. I'm just being myself, and that seems to be different. So after Damos, I had so many different experiences. I worked with many different teams. I went back to university. I actually taught. I was a lecturer for a little bit. That is quite scary. Those poor students that had to listen to me talk about rock engineering for a while. I didn't think they would be great rock engineers today. But it just became clear to me that we must do things differently. And I think one of the points you made earlier was, is what do people think of mining? And I've been doing this for 30 years now. And I'd say, and my colleagues and my peers in the industry don't like me when I say this, but we still don't have a great name. The industry has not really moved the needle on the perception around mining for in many different reasons, not just the environmental impact, just the male-dominated workforces we have, not just the way people get treated at operations, how communities get treated, but also on the safety side. And I'm super passionate about safety and moving it to a totally different way of thinking. And I think part of why we struggle is that you're only as good as your weakest link. And there are mining companies out there and people in the industry that are doing amazing things, absolutely amazing things on the ESG side, on the safety side, on the community side. And then you have one disaster where the tailings dam kills more than 300 people. So those things really, really put the industry back many, many, many years. And then I think the other one is that we really need to ground ourselves in the fact that people do not like mining. We can keep on telling people to like mining and that they should just get it. But until you get it, they don't, then you are not going to take a different tack. Telling people that they need to like you is not that effective. So you've got to find a way to behave differently, to include, to support, to share. And you'll see we're going to go through a very interesting phase now where, my view is there's another big bull market coming, or we're at the start of another big metals bull market. I'm not going to mention a company, but I saw some results this week, and they're making a profit margin of 73%. So the interesting part is that we are going to see some large profits being made, large margins being made. And when you look at it from a capitalist point of view, and where people that we run long-dated capital-intensive businesses, so you make large capital investments, and that needs to be paid back over time. And part of the payback is that it depends on the big swing in metal prices, because there'll be years that you make a lot of money, and other years you'll struggle, but you need to bank those good years. But the problem is the perception from the outside is you're making massive profits. And our mines are a lot of times in countries where, a large proportion of the country's people don't live over the bread line. They live on less than $1 a day or $2 a day. And then you have a mine that makes plus 70% margin. So we're going to have, and we're seeing it in South America at the moment, a move again to push mining companies to share more of their profits. And I think that model will have to shift at some stage. We will have, otherwise we're always just going to have a cyclical thing. We up and down. The relationships are good when everyone kind of feels that they're getting a fair deal, and then it moves again when people feel that they're not getting a fair deal. Yeah, I think that's going to be a big challenge for the industry, because it's more than just technical, and it's more than just the structures and the engagement you have. It's a fundamentally different way of building a mining company.
Yeah.
So interesting challenges for us in the next few years.
Ricus, then just to close out on my question, top 4 things which need to be done differently for mines to re-earn the respect, change, adapt to the future, etc. What are the top things that you are pushing? You are pushing things in minutes and hours and days, and we've seen it, we felt it. So yeah, what are those things?
Yeah, for me, it starts with safety, because so much of that, the mindset that we need is captured in a way that I believe we should be thinking of safety. So I challenge my teams with the question, can you guarantee me no one's going to get hurt today? And that's a challenging question, because both answers, yes and no, is correct. Because if you say, yes, I can, my next question will be why? Because what are you doing so that you can guarantee me no one's going to get hurt? And if you say no, what we need to do right now to make sure that you can, because if we can't do that, if we don't think from that angle where it's not a journey to zero. So people joke about me saying that I hate the word journey. I honestly do not like the word journey when it comes to the thinking around safety, because this the concept of being on a journey towards zero harm or towards a safe future means that I'm going to accept not being there today.
Yes.
That's okay.
Yes.
And so there's one day in future that we all will be okay with, not hurting people. That to me doesn't work. So it kind of gives you a different way of thinking about what do I need to do right now in this moment so that I can get the outcome that I want.
Sure.
So for me, and then it's also, once you take that step, you look at safety, and you would truly want to guarantee the safety of people. You need to be far better in planning and scheduling work.
Wow.
The only way that you can do that is if I know what's happening right now, and I can then make sure that if there are certain tasks that people are doing that have got a high risk of them making a mistake, then I can go and supervise that. I can send someone there to make sure that they know what the risks are, they understand the controls. So it's super important that, so first you need to believe that zero is possible right now. Secondly, you need far, far, far better planning and scheduling. So you start thinking about that. It's also the fundamental building blocks of a mine of the future, because you move from where, in mining, so you would have heard this maybe before, but mining, we use planning as rough guidance. And so
very rough.
Very rough. Yeah, it's like measured every quarter. You see if you kind of went into the direction that you should have. And that might be flippant, but the thing is, if for us to truly get to where we need to be as an industry, we need to do what, for example, the automotive industry does. They plan in hours and seconds. And they plan not just the work they do, but the logistics chains of delivering things. And the thing is, we need to drop the idea that mining is different, mining is difficult, you can't see it, lots of changes. Everything changes for everyone. And once you just believe that you can actually plan and schedule work to the hour and second, and you should have multiple plans ready if this plan can't be executed, then you realize that this is possible. And the other overlay is, will only become truly possible with the use of technology. Because if you look at an underground mine, to be able to plan and schedule, to be able to get people to be safe the whole time, you need technology. You need to know if there's ventilation. You need visibility. You need to know where machines are. You need to make sure that machines can sense people. And so all those things need to be built into the mine of the future. So you asked me what's the 4 things or the 3 things. For me, safety is the absolute starting block of all of this. And then secondly, I'd say that, so I get in trouble for saying this, but I truly believe it, so I will keep on saying it, is that for me, the best outcome for the future of mining is that we don't open more mines.
Wow.
And that we step far, far deeper into the circular economy, and we look at ways of utilizing waste. Our waste piles have got so much metal in it still today. We just need different technology to liberate that. And the beauty of it is people are doing this. And you'll see our Caribou operation, we're studying a fascinating technology called rapid oxidative leach that will fundamentally change the way that mining is being done in New Brunswick, where our mine is. because it goes from ore to metal. There's no concentrate production and then smelting. It goes straight from ore to metal. We retreat all the tailings. We get all the precious metals out of the tailings. And it's an environmentally very, very sound process. So people have developed and are developing technology that is totally going to change mining, not just to get the rock out of the ground, but also then the processing side. I think is going to see some of the biggest shifts in the next decade. So I believe that we need to do a lot more of that. And a link to that is the third point is energy. I think what's going to make this all possible is the advent of cheap electricity. So, 10 years ago, I ran the HSE function for BHP Billiton. And one of the things that I worked on was a climate change policy for Billiton, for BHP back then. And I remember the conversations that I got to, this, again, was one of those amazing opportunities. You get given a task and it changes your life. So I got to learn, I got to spend time with the top climate change people in the world back then, and also people that looked at different alternative energy sources. And I can remember the first time I spoke to this renewable energy expert, and she said to me, energy will become a lot cheaper, virtually free, in the next 20 years. And I looked at it and I thought, that's a wild statement that I truly didn't believe at all at the time. Like, what do you mean? And also the other statement she made was that the whole idea of base load that needs to come from coal or, these big non-renewable sources, fossil fuels will not be necessary in future, that you can create base load with renewable energy. And I also thought, well, I can't see that. And honestly, she was absolutely spot on. And the thing is, I've come to see that energy is going to become a lot cheaper. And the reality of that is that will allow us to treat much lower grade stockpiles. It'll allow us to
brings your cut-off grade right down because of the cost of energy.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the overlay of technology and the overlay of the cost of energy, I think, is going to make a huge difference. And then lastly, I'd say it's people in our industry. We're sitting at a very interesting and a very challenging juncture in our industry, from a training and a skilled workforce, and also lifestyle. The pandemic has been terrible, but also godsend, because it showed us that we can move a lot faster than what people can think. Countries and the world can actually do stuff in hours and days if we really all either get forced or pulled together in one direction.
Our mindset.
It can be done. And I think we've got to grab that mindset and see why and what happened there, and create that for training the workforce of the future. Because the type of people and the type of skill sets that we have today will not be effective in the next 5 to 10 years. And for me, I say this to the Trevali workforce, the workforce of the future is the current one retrained.
Sure.
And we need to find ways to do that. And we need to find ways to support them to do that whilst they're also creating the most sustainable mining company in the world. So, yeah.
I remember some 20 odd years ago, one of the first meetings I had on one of the world's deepest gold mines here in South Africa. And interestingly enough, I was working on a health and safety project there as well. And I walked into the Monday morning meeting of the general manager, and it was in an auditorium. And he was going through the previous month's numbers, and he looked at the electricity cost. And he said to his team, and I can't use the exact words that he used because it's not repeatable in polite society, but he said something to the tune of, if you think I'm happy with this energy bill, try me next month and you'll find my size 9 somewhere you don't like it. and it struck me that things have to change in order for us to continue with the mining industry that provides the kind of comforts, or that's the basis for the kinds of comforts that the world is used to. We're kind of running out of time, and you've touched on many of the things that we wanted to. Thanks so much for that. It's absolutely fascinating.
Fascinating.
Yeah. I want to quickly come back to another interest that you have before we draw our podcast to a close, and that is, you referred to bicycles earlier on. You're involved with or started a company, if I'm not mistaken, called Mellow Velo. Tell us a little bit more about that, because that also talks to your passion for people.
Yeah, so I started this nearly 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and it started with just a project that I wanted to help people in the community called Show Some Love. And Show Some Love was about, because I love cycling and I love being outside and being fit, and I wanted to share some of that passion with others that didn't have access to it. So what I started was a foundation, whatever you want to call that. But the idea was that we would take older bikes, so people that donate their old bikes that they don't use anymore, and then rebuild and refurbish the bicycle with someone in need. So someone at risk, a kid's at risk, or someone in need. So we started rebuilding bikes, identified kids that wanted the bike but didn't have the means to buy one. So we would take that and then rebuild the bike with them. So they had to put in hours, to get it to a state where they can then ride away with it. Because the idea was at the end of it, they can take the bike. So we started that, and then I quickly, that's maybe why I'm not a Formula One driver or a mechanic, is because I realized I'm not that great at fixing bikes. I need some help because some bicycles are pretty technical these days, and it looks a lot simpler than it is. Yeah. So I started looking for a bike mechanic to help me, and then I couldn't find one, and then I decided, well, I'll buy a bike shop, because bike shops have mechanics. So so I ended up buying a bike shop, and then and it was also a bit of a challenge for me from a startup community. How do you start a small business in a community, and how do you run a small business, and how does that differ from large organizations? And I can tell you it's totally different. It's a totally different experience. And I love branding. So we created the brand Mellow Velo. So if you put the words Mellow Velo, it says Mellow with one L next to one another, it says love in the middle. And that's where, if you see the heart, that's the logo. That is a M and a V. A heart is a M and a V. So Mellow Velo. Right. So I love, and it's all built around connecting the passion for cycling with passion for community. Because what we have is Mellow Velo, the larger concept now, it still has the social side of it, but it also has a coffee shop with healthy food. It's got the best coffee in Bunbury, where the shop is located. And it's created a community, not just a cycling community, but a community of people that come in and spend time and connect. So we sell the best bikes and also make the best coffee. And we actually supported one of the Olympic athletes in Australia. We have racing teams. So we've got social teams that go out for rides. And it's a concept that I think every town needs a Mellow Velo. You can franchise that over time as well, because it truly is a safe space for people to get in. I don't know if you guys cycle, but in the beginning, when you start cycling and you walk into a bike shop, if your legs are not shaven, you feel a bit out. You feel like a bit intimidated walking into a bike shop. And that's what we wanted to break, is the stigma around bicycle shops. It's all about racing, and that it's actually a very inclusive, and it provides mobility to millions of people around the world. It provides education. So in large parts of Africa, people will not have an education if they didn't have bicycles.
And for reference to our global audience, Bunbury is 2 hours drive south of Perth, more or less. But you are sitting in Vancouver today.
Yes, I am. Yeah, so I'm running it remotely, but again, and it comes back to a team. So I've got an amazing team of people that are there, that are super passionate about the business, and talk a couple of times a week. And they run and through the pandemic, have been able to run a very successful business. So they are all partners in a business now. So it's truly like a large family business.
Ricus, thank you so much. That is really incredible. I guess it does speak to the values that we, as your partner and also a service provider to Trevali, have seen and experienced in dealing with you. It's been a pleasure having you on MindWarp. Thank you so much. We always end this discussion with a similar question. We'll publish this onto our website so that people have access to it. What is on your bedside table? What are you reading?
Yeah, at the moment, I finished the book Blink from Malcolm Gladwell. I don't know if you ever read that, Blink. Really, really interesting. And it kind of helps people understand that we all have prejudices, and it's not your fault. It's just being human, So it's more being aware of it. That's the power of it lies in that, is that once you realize that we all have that and we all do that, and it's just how do you catch yourself. I just actually last night ordered on Amazon another book called 1984. I don't know if you ever read that.
Yeah, George Orwell.
I want to read that. I've read some good reviews.
Yeah.
And again, for me, the interesting part would be to understand how he could predict basically what it looked like in 1984, 70 years earlier. So what is it that he saw and how that relates to what we do today. So I look forward to reading that.
Absolutely. Ricus, thank you so much. John, over to you to close.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ricus. And to the audience, please remember when you're working with Ricus, he is the no journeys, hours to minutes CEO, which believes in safety first. However, what was fascinating to me is that drives everything else. It drives planning, etc. But from other people, you'll hear planning and efficiency, and then right at the bottom, safety. So safety, the circular economy, free energy, and remember to retrain people and to have completely new skills. We thank you, Ricus. Thank you so much for joining. We hope we can do this again in future with you. We're looking out for what you are doing in the communities with a keen eye and with green metals and with green energy. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you.